With me, economist Ruth Lea and Sam Bowman from the Adam Smith Institute. We had you on, what, a week or 2 weeks before the decision. You thought you knew which way it was going. You were right, but there are immediate jitters, aren't there, in the city? What do you say?
There are. I mean, Friday, obviously, the markets were in turmoil, there's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, FTSE actually was only down about 3%. Sterling had fallen, I mean, there's no question. And, of course, it had been ramped up before the referendum result because the markets thought we were actually going to stay in. But it was 136, 137 against the dollar, which was only a bit lower than it had been in February. And actually, the gilts market was actually firmed, which was actually quite a vote of confidence, I think, in Britain.
Within a very short space of time, no rumours, I'm not quite sure whether they have been confirmed from JP Morgan, or Morgan Stanley rather, that they would move 2,000 staff to Dublin or Frankfurt. We've got talk of HSBC immediately moving staff to Paris.
Yeah.
It looks like it's going to happen as predicted.
Well, who knows what they're going to do? I think the JP Morgan stuff is pretty speculative at the moment. As for HSBC, I'd just say hang on a minute, because there's something called MiFID II that's going to come in that's going to be very akin to a passport system, and of course the financial services industry is very concerned that that continues. But when MiFID II comes in, there's going to be a system of regulatory equivalence which will actually act as a quasi-passport for complying countries.
So you're saying, just so viewers are absolutely clear, that people will have an arrangement at the moment which they have, which allows them, if they're based in London, to passport themselves into America. You think there will be a replacement?
Yes.
Sam Bowman, actually answer that. Do you think that's the case? We can see a smooth transition now?
I think it quite probably is, and we have to remember that a lot of the job losses are contingent on the UK leaving the single market, which actually probably won't happen. What we're seeing now is that a lot of people, both on Remain and Leave, are saying that the best deal for the UK would be to leave the European Union but remain within the single market, an arrangement that Norway and Iceland both have.
Why is the assumption that that will happen, though? Because you'll know during the campaign there started to be quite clear ruptures within the Leave campaign, and Michael Gove saying we wouldn't necessarily be part of that single market.
Well, that's true, but we didn't vote Leave. We voted on a single question about whether we're in or out of the European Union. And now we've had people like Daniel Hannan, who is on the Leave campaign, has been a Leave campaigner for decades, saying that, no, we shouldn't be immediately trying to end freedom of movement if that means economic collapse.
We know how volatile this can be, though, and we know it's a kind of, you know, it's a global industry, this. Do you think the city, do you think some of these big players will look now at Frankfurt, at Paris, at Dublin seriously? And there is a threat, there is a risk that London's position will come under fire.
Well, the real problem and the real thing that markets, I think, are worried about is uncertainty. Right now, we don't know what kind of deal we're going to get. And what the government needs to do, what really all people running for the Conservative leadership need to do, is say, this is what we want. This EEA deal is a very, very safe way of leaving the European Union. Economically, not that much will change in the short term, and that will calm down markets and will calm down these firms that are looking to leave the UK.
How long does uncertainty go on? If you have, presumably, uncertainty to get you to go political a little bit away from the... Uncertainty is about who the next Prime Minister is. Uncertainty before we get on to the kind of negotiations of Article 50 or 2 years.
Whatever. I think we're in for a boat of uncertainty. I don't think there's any doubt about that. By the way, I disagree with this notion that we'd stay in the single market, because after all, one of the big themes of the campaign has been immigration, and not least of all uncontrolled immigration from the European Union. And if we do stay in the single market, then of course we still have freedom movement of labour. But that is one to be debated.
But you do accept there is a potential here for much more turmoil down the line. It's only just begun. You say the pound rallied and what have you, but you accept and would expect a lot more turmoil to come.
Well, there will be some uncertainty, there will be turmoil, but the fact is we will still be in the European Union for at least another 2 years, if not longer. Trade will continue, and I think after a while people will settle down and realise that this is a new norm. And then there'll be a trade deal that will be negotiated, perhaps not the single market, we'll have to wait and see, and then trade will continue and people say, well, what was all the problem about?
OK, time is moving on, and developments at Westminster, we're told to you both. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
But first, the spectre of lower house prices was invoked by both sides during the campaign. George Osborne warned that Brexit would devalue this precious asset. Ian Duncan Smith said it would give young people a chance of owning their own home. What's likely? Max McGill has more.